Hey everyone and welcome to the Learning Ladder. Today we are doing a video on IGCSEs versus the US High School Diploma. Now this is specifically what things to think about, why you might choose one or the other, and pros and cons really. Now preface this, I'm not an expert, I have never actually done this before. Obviously I've done GCSEs myself, but I mean as a parent helping guide your child to make this decision, it'll be my first child that I will be guiding down this path, so just bear that in mind. And again, this is my opinion from research that I have done. You know, do your own research, decide obviously as you will what is best for your child. So let's just start by looking at what they are. So the US High School Diploma, and this is the generalization because obviously there are outliers, children start younger, older and everything else. I'm talking about the typical age child or average child, I guess. So US High School Diploma, children start in year 9 or grade 9, and they can earn credits from year 8 and everything else. We're not going to go there, we're just going to look at the bog standard typical child. So they start in year 9 counting their credits, and they count year 9, 10, 11 and 12. At the end of the year 12 they would graduate with their high school diploma, earning however many credits that state requires. They vary. Some states 24, some states 26, so on. Obviously you'll have to, if you're in the US, you'll know that your state will vary. If you're in the UK you might not know that, but they do. Now when you actually well, we'll get to that bit in a second. So that's basically the high school diploma. So IGCSEs, I'm not talking about GCSEs because GCSEs are notoriously difficult for home educated students to do. They can, it's not impossible. It depends what you want, which one you're doing. But some GCSEs have coursework elements, and it is nigh impossible to find, as a private candidate, someone to assess your coursework. It's not impossible, so don't be put off. Try. Ring everywhere. I think depending on where you live it might be easier. So for example, if you're in a city like London or somewhere like that, you might find it easier than say someone like me who lives in Scotland. So in IGCSE world, again, you could start year 9 if you wanted. You could start year 10, year 11. Usually, not always, it's a 2-year course. Sometimes kids can do it in a year, but generally speaking it's a 2-year course, and you will either do one of the first or second option. You will either do them maybe 1 or 2 a year until you graduate, or you might do all at once. Now that might, the reason you might differ is because if the course, say for example they're going to university, if the course that they're wanting to sit in university says that they have to have sat 5 GCSEs all at one time, that might be why you would differ. And courses like that tend to be really academic things like medicine, veterinary medicine. They might want you to do your 5 GCSEs all at one time in one sitting, not spread out over different years. Best thing to do, like with everything, contact the university that your child is thinking of going to, ask them, because they're the best ones to tell you what their entry requirements are, and that's how you'll know which is the best option for you. So you might decide, as I said, to do 1 or 2 a year, or you might decide to just do all 5 at one time. Now IGCSEs are primarily 100% exam, so that's why they're a lot easier for home educators to do. Not easier in terms of difficulty level, they're just as hard as regular GCSEs, often harder because there's no coursework element to it, but easier in terms of having access to them because you don't have to have your coursework assessed. So they're often 100% exam. That's something to bear in mind as well if you are thinking about, well, should I do 1 or 2 at a time, because it's a lot of, well, basically the whole exam is going to be their grade. So you might decide, actually I think spacing them out is better if their final destination, university, doesn't require them to all be sat at one time. So the main difference that I have noted between the two is the US High School Diploma, you will finish in year 12 ordinarily, which would be 18, and then you would go on to university with your high school diploma and either AP classes, so advanced placement classes, which is kind of like an A level, which is usually about a year, or you would have to sit an SAT, depending on what the university wants. So again, to find out what the university wants, you will look on their website or contact them, and you'll be looking at the international student requirements, because the US High School Diploma is obviously an international qualification as opposed to the bog standard A levels and GCSEs here. So you'd be looking at what their requirements are for US High School Diploma entry as an international student requirement, although make it very clear to them that you're not an international student, it's just the qualification that they have or will have. So it might be that you'll need something. Usually courses I've looked at, it's usually SATs. I think AP classes, again, more if you are looking for medicine or veterinary stuff, like that kind of thing. But for a regular bog standard degree, you probably just need the SAT as well as the high school diploma, and they might have specific requirements. So you might need honours, you might need a certain amount of credits. So those are the two basic ways to achieve them. Now, why would you choose one over the other? So the high school diploma is unique in that you get to oftentimes still control or have autonomy over what curriculum you use. IGCSEs, you're following a syllabus. No ifs or buts, you have to follow that syllabus because the exam is going to be all about that syllabus. So what that usually means is that you'll have to get a textbook or textbooks for that specific syllabus, learn everything from that book, revise past papers for that subject, and then you will go and do your exam. With the high school diploma, you'll be earning credits every year up until the time when you graduate. So there's much more freedom and flexibility. However, in order to, as a UK student, in order to have that US high school diploma mean something, so whether that's because your child wants to go to college or university, it needs to be an accredited institute that produces your transcript for you. You can't just willy-nilly produce your own transcript, which is different than in America, because they can, as an individual person, they can just make their own transcripts, count their own credits. You cannot do that if you want your child to go to further education or higher education. I'm not saying it's impossible, but from my research, it's very, very difficult in order to get that institution to recognise it if it's not an accredited institution that's produced your transcript. So what does that even mean? You as a parent have to find an umbrella school in the US who will produce your transcript for you. So there are a couple of different ways to do it. You can go with an institute like a virtual student where they teach the curriculum for you and you earn your credits that way, or you can go as a independent student where you're still choosing your own curriculum and everything else, but you have to tell them what curriculum you're using and what grades your child got for that particular curriculum, so they can keep an official transcript for you. And you'll start doing that in year 9 or grade 9 if that's when you start counting your credits, and they'll keep that each year for you until year 12, when they will send you your certificate of graduation, and it has to be stamped by their body and everything else in order for it to be recognised. But the pro and the con to that is obviously flexibility with choosing your own curriculum, but another pro is that they'll keep all the grades for you and everything else. But there are cons. So I've noticed that the accredited institutes often have higher demands than what a regular high school student would have in terms of graduation. So you might find that I'm not saying a specific amount because I don't know, but say we choose a state. I'm trying to think of a state in America, Colorado. They might have a graduation requirement of 26 credits for a regular diploma and 28 for an honours. I completely made it up. I have no idea what Colorado requires. But the accredited institutions, umbrella schools, will have much higher credits. So oftentimes it'll be 30. So that's something to bear in mind, that you will often have to do more credits than a typical US high school student would need to do in order to get your graduation. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe they're just more rigorous. I don't know. Maybe that's a requirement as part of being accredited. I don't know. All I know is that all the ones I've looked at have always wanted much higher credits than just a regular US high school student would need. So that can be a con, because obviously that's more work required for your child. The other thing is that you have to pay. And oftentimes, for the majority of the time, it's not any cheaper than doing IGCSEs. So if you're thinking, that'll be cheaper than doing IGCSEs, it doesn't appear to be the case to me. So if financials come into it, I would say that they're equally balanced. I think it'll cost probably about the same as to do maybe slightly more to do the high school diploma, because you end up having to buy your curriculum as well, versus the IGCSEs, where it's just textbooks, which oftentimes aren't as much as a full course of curriculum can be. So that's something to bear in mind. But don't forget, with the IGCSE, you have to pay the exam board, and you also have to pay the centre that you are taking the exams at. And now you can teach the syllabus yourself, But a lot of people do tend to branch out, so they might use classes online or YouTube videos and everything else to support, not just doing the books. I think that a lot of that depends on whether or not you've homeschooled from the beginning, because I think if you have, you're used to using textbooks and everything to guide you, whereas if your child has just dropped out of year 9 or whatever of school, or you withdrew them, whatever, it might be a bit more difficult, especially with it being GCSEs. It might be scary to think that, so therefore they'll find tutors or someone along those lines to help them with their revision for their exams. So if you do that, obviously that's going to add up the price versus obviously teaching it yourself. So there are pros and cons to both. I think the biggest con to doing the high school diploma, and I think that's generally the misunderstanding of what it's used for, is if you are not wanting if you're wanting to go to college, so in the UK, so not university but college, further education, you might often find extremely difficult for them to accept that your US high school diploma is equivalent to 5 GCSEs, which is often the prerequisite to get onto any college course for A-levels or anything along those lines. Now, from what I can see, even though it's accredited, the most that it'll be classed as is 2 GCSEs, which is English and Maths, nothing else. So that's something to bear in mind. If you are going to university, however, I don't think that it's as bad, the difficulty in getting it matched, because universities have international student guidelines already set out. They, specify whether you need AP classes, they specify whether you need SATs and what the score is and everything else. So I think and also they're more experienced. They've had more experience with international students coming over with the US high school diploma, so they're more comfortable with it. Whereas I think colleges here, they haven't had a lot of experience with US high school diplomas. You often find them saying, why has your child got a US high school diploma when they live in the UK, and things like that. And there seems to be some confusion as to what it's actually worth and everything else. But obviously if you have got yours accredited, then it seems like it's only worth 2 GCSEs. So that's something to bear in mind. That might be a massive con for you. Or if your child isn't going to college and is going to go straight to university, bearing in mind they're supposed to, in theory, do their high school diploma until they're 18, then they go straight to university, they'd be skipping college altogether. So it might not be an issue, but it's something to really consider if college is the next step for you. Maybe go with the IGCSEs in that case. Again, up to you, but that's something that I would strongly lean more towards if that was where we were heading. So those are the pros and cons, I guess, of both of them. In terms of us and what we're planning to do, I'm waiting to give her another year to decide career-wise what she's thinking. She's currently thinking she wants to go into illustration, and a degree in illustration, either one will work perfectly for us, high school diploma or IGCSEs. Either one would be great. So we don't have that, oh, we have to make a decision right now. I'd much rather give her a year just to solidify her choices, make sure she's happy and everything else with what she's thinking of, and then I'll make that decision. As I said, because we're flexible. However, if she pivots and goes back to something different or something else, then that might change what we would need to do, because obviously I'd have to go back and look at university courses, degrees that she was considering, and see what their requirements were, whether they would accept the US high school diploma, what they needed in terms of SAT or AP classes, what IGCSEs they needed, do they need A-levels and everything else, what would those be, and how would it all look like. So for right now, we can go either way. I haven't made the decision. She hasn't made the decision in terms of what well, actually, I know she preferred the high school diploma than the IGCSEs, but ultimately as a parent, I have to guide her the best way I can to make sure that the education I'm providing is going to meet her end-term goal, because I don't want her turning around and saying to me, why did you let me do that when I should have done the IGCSEs in the future, obviously, if her decision changes as to what course she wants to do. But don't forget, you have always got the flexibility of doing GCSEs at college. So for example, if everything goes to pot and they do their high school diploma and then realize actually that was the wrong thing to do, they can always go to college and do their GCSEs in a year. Some places will do, and then get onto the A-level course or whatever it was they wanted to do. So there's flexibility. It's not the end of the world if you choose the wrong thing, but I just really want to give her that chance to mature a bit. I mean, when I was 12, 13, did I know what career I wanted? Yes. Did I know what was required to get there? Did I think it was possible? Yes, because I was 12 and 13. But once you have actually got a bit of maturity and really understand what the requirements are, how much money is involved to get that course and everything else, I actually wanted to be a vet. Did I realise exactly properly at 12 and 13 what that would actually require in terms of money? No. Did I realise that when I was 16 and was looking into it more? Yes. Did I end up being a vet? No. Would I have, you know, done things differently? Possibly, but you know, no one can go back in time and change things, can they? But all I know is that they are both valid choices. They are both feasible as a UK student. You just really have to go forward in terms of what it is that they want to achieve, and then go backwards. Okay, what steps do I need to help and guide them to get to that place? So that's everything. If you've got any questions, leave them below and I'll get back to you. Take care. Bye for now.